The vision originally was culture of entertainment choices, 50, 60 years old, to family-orientated events. Ultimately ended up with a race to the lowest common denominator. A lot of people doing the same thing.
We're at a 40-year low of crime rate in McAllen. What I saw and what I invested in is not what we got. As founders of the Heart of McAllen, we kind of want people to say, listen, the plan is there.
We need to invest here. There's something worth protecting here.
So welcome everyone. My name is Kristen Mossbrucker-Garza. I'm a news reporter here at the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal, and welcome to our podcast. Today we have some really special guests. We have Bert Guerra of Cine and James Alexander with the Flying Walrus. They're both business owners here in downtown McAllen, and they're part of the board of a new business association called the Heart of McAllen. And so I kind of just wanted to get a better sense, what inspired this group? And, for folks who aren't very familiar, how would you describe downtown McAllen today?
I guess you'd have to clear that up. And I think the best way to answer that actually is more in in two-part, because I think the best way to talk about that honestly is what was the vision for downtown McAllen, and then what did you ultimately get? So the vision originally was bars, restaurants, venues, mixed culture of entertainment choices that would appeal to really every level within the community, 50, 60 years old, to family-orientated events. Unfortunately, over time, left to its own devices without kind of a real direction or oversight, I don't want to point fingers so early in the conversation, but really no city direction, right? It was just kind of left to its own devices for about 10 to 12 years. You ultimately ended up with what I don't want to be too damning of it, but a race to the lowest common denominator. A lot of people doing the same thing. And they're all doing the same thing. Now they're undercutting each other, price gouging and everything else. There's 20 bars with a total capacity, if you add up all of the things, of 4,000, going after the same 1,500 people. It's not what the city originally envisioned. It's just what they ultimately ended up with.
And that's primarily on 17th Street.
Well, 17th Street is the corridor, really, from Austin to Dallas, and technically it goes further if you look at the city maps and stuff like that. But the core area is from Austin to Dallas up and down 17th Street. Arguably, the entertainment district also includes the Gremlin, which is technically not on 17th Street. It's on 16th. But it's still part of that same ecosystem of interwoven bars, venues, nightclubs, that comprise what anybody from the outside looking in is going to call the entertainment district. In a larger sense, that entertainment district also includes businesses and restaurants along Old 83 when you talk about House Wine and La Bandita. And there's several other bars in that Austin, I believe it's about 14th Broadway, right? In that area, and arguably that is a part of that whole McAllen downtown and the larger entertainment scene for downtown McAllen. Nobody would say that's 17th, but when you talk about downtown McAllen, I think you would include those as well.
Yeah, I'm going to want to clarify that the Heart of McAllen basically is just covering what the heart of the city was and still is. If you look at the maps of what McAllen should be covering or said they were going to cover in their original business plan that we invested in because we understood that's what they were going to do, so this is what we did. And like James pointed out, this was not just about the entertainment district. This is also about the retail. This is also about residential. This is also about landowners and stakeholders, plus, you know, people that operate their properties, because there's a disconnect between sometimes what people do that run the business versus the stakeholders that own the business. So unfortunately what happened, and I guess get straight to the point, it was very like a viral video that really set this thing off. It wasn't based on fact, you know, because if you look at the facts, you're going to have the police chief of McAllen touting that we're at a 40-year low of crime rate in McAllen. So we were very disheartened by the way certain city leaders led this, especially the mayor of McAllen, because I think the mayor should have taken a tone of, we want to look out for the police officer, but we want to look out for this kid. This kid's part of our community. We as a community need to look out for each other if they're on the wrong track. I personally wrote an email to the mayor and to the commissioners to let them know that there was a bill in 2023 that passed called SB 1819 that did away with curfews. And so this problem that we're having about minors, and I'm talking about people under 17, legally can be out in the street at any time, not in a bar. They can just be out in the street. And that is a problem that we're seeing in all states that needs to be repealed.
All cities within the state. It's that's
thank you.
statewide. That's statewide.
Interesting. Okay, so just to catch the audience up, so in the downtown district is essentially a zoning and planning mechanism. So all of the businesses operating, mostly bars and nightclubs, obtain these special use permits, right? And so there's fees associated with these permits, whether you have parking or not. This was a curated effort by the city of McAllen to revitalize their downtown, right? They put a plan into place. It was called Heart of the City McAllen. That was back in 2004. And so they kind of had this vision. Business owners like Bert and like James kind of invested in that vision, right? And so y'all got involved with Cine in like mid-2000s, right?
Well, the original that we bought it from, we got involved with him in 2006. And we took it over officially in 2007 in March. So the first concerts that they started doing, there was a concert series that the city would do. There was a lot. We used to host dinners that would recognize people in the city. So the theater was being used a lot by the city. And we did this for free. We weren't getting paid. We did this to contribute because of the revitalization that they promised us to have that was coming. And it wasn't just because we were worried about us. We wanted it to be very diverse. The plans involved parks, they involved an STC, they involved more of a art type of incubator place for people. So what I saw and what I invested in is not what we got. And so as founders of the Heart of McAllen, we kind of want people to say, listen, the plan is there. Everything is there. We just need to get back on track. And now we realize things change when you get commissioners. I've seen 4 mayors change. I can't count how many commissioners have changed since I've been there for the 20 years. But you realize when they get off track and we don't remind them, then they really get off track to the point where we can have meetings with them and they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because they don't know. They weren't there. They weren't even in office. And I've never experienced that because I've always been a business owner, just working on my business, never worrying about the bigger picture. And unfortunately, and it's not that they don't care, they just don't know. So once they know, I think they understand us now. And so that's why I realized we didn't want to be just a bunch of bars, even though most of our stuff that we do is art. It's live entertainment. We invest a lot in the regional stages that people can provide, that we can provide for let regional artists become more. Some of the bands that have gone on to do certain things started at Cine. And so I'm very proud of that. And that historically has been the case when you look at Carlos Guzman, Freddie Fender, Wally Gonzalez, a lot of these Tejano people, pioneers, before Freddie was Freddie, they started on that stage. So that's why it's very important to keep it an all ages venue and let people know it's historically some of the older business owners that pioneered McAllen that are rooted economically came from 17th Street. So whether you're a Guerra or a Shari or Khalifa, some of these people at their age should not be worried about their properties getting repoed now because nobody wants to rent them. So it's ironic that the McAllen leadership right now is not paying. And a lot of that has to do because the McAllen mayor and the city manager, they're not from here. So they don't understand the history of the families and the people that contributed to McAllen. So I think there's a disconnect in that and a lack of respect, actually.
And y'all started Flying Walrus, in 2013 timeframe?
2012.
Okay.
May 2012.
And what inspired y'all to start the business? How would you describe it for folks who aren't very familiar? And what was your initial vision?
So we what's interesting about having Bert and myself here is really the longevity of the two businesses. They've kind of seen it since the core beginnings to what we all have now ultimately. What he does and I do are very much interrelated because there's a lot of emphasis on culture and music and stuff and such. The Walrus had a little bit different. He started off at theater, right? We were a small little bar, smaller than about the size of this studio. We added a patio, then went to the adjacent building, and then expanded our patio, and kind of grew with our clientele. But for one reason or another, music was just kind of like a core part of that vision from the get-go. And we started off with trios and solo artists and such, and to what you see now, where we've got whole shows and various tribute acts and touring artists and everyone else like that.
And two stages.
Yeah, and two stages.
And
yeah,
like billiards and.
Right, we've expanded, we've grown, and that's where it's for me in particular is that my love for what we've done downtown in this community and what we've grown into has really come with time, blood, sweat, and tears. There's virtually no part of the modern Flying Walrus that I didn't build myself with my own hands or directly oversee the work of it. If you go to the back now, the stage in the back, about more than half of that was my own hands. The stages in the front, I built entirely myself. Hired a worker to help me, but got it done. So it means a lot when you talk about years of investment, years of blood and sweat, years of community building. It's not something that happened overnight. When I led out earlier, I talked about the music ecosystem, which I wish Tony from the Gremlin was here because he's really a part of it as well, a big part of it. These artists, they depend on these stages. They depend on these stages as jumping points. We are very well known for. Really, we're blessed to have our host Julian David Ramirez every Wednesday with our open mics. Traditionally, most places they'll have their open mics, and you're lucky if you got a host. It's usually a gatekeeper, and he's giving you a mic, and you got maybe two speakers up there, and he's like, "Okay, you want to do something? Good luck, have fun." And that's not what we do. We provide lighting and tech support, sound support. There's usually so many people in the audience that we'll have like a solo acoustic writer and he'll come up with his guitar. We'll keep guitars on the stage and say, if you didn't bring a guitar, just borrow one of ours. But they'll usually bring their own. And they'll more times than not, and I'd say like far more times than not, a bassist from the audience will be, "Hey, can I just tell me what chord you're in? I'd like to join in." And a drummer would be like, "Oh, I dig what you're doing. Like, let me join in." And jam sessions will break out every Wednesday, unplanned, like I say, organic. At this point, we have just within this music community now about 10 that I can count off the top of my head that are actively playing at venues, various venues throughout the RGV, and are starting to tour Texas-wide. That all started where? At our open mic.
Really?
And I mean, I could name off some of them if you'd like. Currently, right now, it's Street Read, Takeout Rogue, Vertigo. In the past, there was an all-female band. I think sadly they split up. But Bragg, their first show ever. They were the Dead Lilies. But they played at the Flying Walrus and became Bragg, and a number of others, PSA, etc. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to count them all. And it might even sound like bragging, but I'm proud of it. And I think Bert, he's proud of it too. And I believe Tony would be as well. And it is something to be proud of because you've provided something that's, I mean, we're not operating from government funds, we're private. And really, I don't want to turn this into some sort of bashing of the city thing. In fact, with the Heart of McAllen, I think that we could both agree that we're at least cautiously optimistic about the conversations that we've had so far. We both believe that. Don't let me speak for you, but we've spoke before now, obviously, and we both believe that when there is a clear exchange, that we can build something great together, and that it can't just be like a one-sided investment. And unfortunately, up until recently, it really has just been us kind of driving the ship against a lot of obstacles. I'll wrap it up because I guess maybe I veered off. These venue spaces, these stages, they mean more than just a bar or a theater or whatever. These are the birthplaces of your new culture. He tipped his hat to Freddie Fender and some of the older Tejano artists. Well, what about the 19 and 20 and 21-year-old artists now? They're saying, where's my stage? Where do I go to be discovered? How do I develop my art? And that's something that we do. Downtown McAllen has always kind of been that like go-to point. Like, well, that's where I meet if I'm a young DJ. How do I get my music heard? Well, I'm going to have to go to these clubs, and they're going to have to give me a chance. And so that's always been so important. But unfortunately, it's my feeling that the city of McAllen largely hasn't understood. You can give voice to it. You can tip your hat to it in a snappy little media quote. But that ecosystem is valuable, deserves protection, it deserves direct investment, much like you'll do in Austin when they're diverting into their cultural programs and their concerts and their live events, and a little recognition. Both Bert at Cine El Rey and ourselves at the Flying Walrus were both recognized last year by the Texas Music Office through the TMIR Texas Music Incubator Rebate Program as official music venues worthy of a tax rebate in recognition of those efforts. And unfortunately, that's not been our experience with the city of McAllen. It's never really like, hey, y'all are valuable. We need to invest here. There's something worth protecting here. Unfortunately, following that incident, August 24th, with a police officer in the street, the entire conversation's been negative, and that's what Bert was talking about. And I can say that. By the way, you kept calling us board members. We're founders. We're founders.
Okay.
We're still working our way through what the heart of, because it includes the historical district of homes. Mm-hmm. It includes some people that have very deep investments in McAllen that I want to respect, that we're trying to get them on our advisory board because they were here when these plans were implemented. And I know they're disheartened that all the work that they went to planning these plans just got discarded, and so they're like, okay, guys, we need to come up with a new plan. I think we just need people to realize, and that's why I sent you the document, because I realize people like yourself and the public have never seen these documents. I've seen them, so I understand them. What I got to remember is that the public does not understand. What got me, and it didn't get me upset, I was just very disappointed because they say they don't want to go back to the past, meaning these plants. But yet they just said, we're going to do the Bowie Reservoir project. Well, that's phase 2 of these plants. How can you cherry pick phase 2 and not finish phase 1? And we are suffering because if you look at these plans, it's like an architect. The foundation has to be a certain way at a certain time. There were supposed to be 3 parking garages. We only got 1, which was for the entertainment district. But the retail suffered because they never got their 2 parking garages. So when you blame retail for their problems, I don't really blame them as much as you didn't do the part that was supposed to help them. Mm-hmm. Now, it's debatable. The problem with art as being a businessman and being on both sides, a musician first and probably a businessman second, the dividends not come at the end of the day. It's not 9 to 5. You're not just going to end up getting all this money at the end of the month because you hosted a bunch of young artists. But I tell you what, the dividends comes when they come back to you and they say, hey, we went to the Grammys. Or, hey, I'm touring with this person or that person. I'm not a big name dropper. I'm sorry if I'm, but I can assure you that the work, what's unique about Cine, and I only have the baton. I don't even treat it like it's mine. In fact, people recognize James at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
I'm very much behind the scenes. I really don't like to come out, but the few times that I've come out and spoke on things that I think the city went away, we were able to overcome them and win those decisions, whether it was saving the Roosevelt School or implementing the 21 and over thing that they tried to do in 2015. And, you know, Freddie Fender wasn't Freddie Fender when he performed. His original name was Walter, what I thought. He lost every contest at Cine LA from what they told me. He hated McAllen because he didn't feel people respected his art form. Although in the Lower Valley, he was very popular. And he was a big hit on the radio, and then he used to perform at another theater in Harlingen and win every contest. And I think that's so ironic that I've worked with him when I used to do production. I used to tour and do sound. I wish I would have known that. I would have loved to have asked him, you know, because sometimes people have good experiences at venues, and sometimes they have bad experiences at venues or cities. And so those are the type of stories I think are interesting to our culture, because Cine LA is the only national landmark in America for Hispanic culture that's still privately owned. We're not owned by the city, county, federal government. So that responsibility of having that baton, you know, because it was the mayor or the city manager, and I keep saying he was one of them, but they said profits before people. That's all we cared about. That was like a headline. And to be honest with you, that broke my heart, because during COVID, we had an offer from Live Nation to buy the theater, to sell it. And if I would have sold it, I could live off interest. I've never been in that point in my life thinking about just myself, because it's just not in me. But for them to say that really hurt me, because they don't know the sacrifices that we have made, whether it's building the stage or staying up later because the band needs to load out, or going earlier because they want to do a sound check. All that stuff, we do it because we love what we're doing. And people might think, what does that mean? It means the world to some kids. It means the world to somebody that's going to become something else. One of the most moving stories I ever heard was a kid, I say a kid, but he came with his wife and his kids to say thank you. I don't remember him. But he told me, and this is what he told me, that he had got caught smoking in the restroom, smoking pot. Our security company policy is to call the police. That's their policy. Somehow they asked me, what did you want us to do? And I said, listen, let me talk to the kids. And so I told them, listen, I'm going to kick you out, but you can come back tomorrow. You can come back another day. But if you want to stay, this guy has to call the police. Of course, they were mad and they left. Well, 10 years later, he comes with his wife and his kids, and he's a McAllen police officer now. And he said, if I would have got a record, I would have never got into the military. That decision that I made really was to protect us, but it was also to protect somebody that makes a mistake. So we're going to have issues with people, but if we're going to be hard on them, they might not be able to get into the military. They might not be able to become a police officer or get married and have kids. We don't know. So ambiguously, we're really raising a society and a community when they come to these venues, and we take that very seriously. I don't remember that incident. I'm glad he brought it up to me. I cried when he told me, because seeing his kids and seeing his wife happy, not knowing what they were talking about, but him saying thank you because he remembered, that meant a lot more than getting an award or getting recognized. So I admire when people come back and say thank you for us. 20 years has been a long time. It seems like it was just yesterday. But I do wish, with the time that I got left, because at my age and the time that I put into the theater, I want the city to get back on track to the Heart of the City plans. And hopefully the Heart of McAllen will help identify and take responsibility and ownership of who made mistakes. But let's move forward. You know, I'm not about blaming people, but a lot of the communication that I had with the administration has been behind the scenes, emails. I'm not trying to go to the media and stuff like this. But I realized it can't just be me and James. It has to be the stakeholders, the residential people in the downtown area. We're here in Edinburgh, and we took a little tour of what y'all got going on here. And what's so ironic is Brownsville, Harlingen, Edinburgh was all inspired by McAllen from 2004, 2005. And now we're a footnote we're behind of whatever everybody else is doing in their downtown area. And so for me to invest 20 years and be in last place as far as a community, it's very disheartening, you know, because we're giving it all every day, you know. And so to work with a different city administrator or a different commissioner, you know, God bless our commissioner, but it took him 6 years to get my lights on in back of our alley. We had over 300 streetlights out, and that took a long time to get done. Now, a lot of that has to do with AEP and stuff, but we haven't had Christmas decorations downtown McAllen since 2015. On 4th of July, there's not a single flag anymore in downtown. And most people that are McAllen residents remember going downtown on Christmas. It was a big deal for a young kid to see Christmas lights, and it was a big deal to see the 4th of July parade. And I just think those type of bringing back a downtown to McAllen needs to be revisited. And why did simple things like that? And I compared it to growing up in a home. You grow up in a home and it's Christmas time, you don't see a Christmas tree. There's dysfunction in the family. There seems to be no spirit of that type of Christmas for a young kid, right? Or a father or a mother to show that the kids that there's love in this home. I feel like that as a community, there's a disconnect of neglect to the downtown area of McAllen, specifically the Heart of McAllen. The thing that is rooted in the economic system that built McAllen has unfortunately been neglected.
It's interesting. I remember, so for folks who aren't familiar, you know, so this, they call it an ECOG, but it's like these special permits, this special district, you know, there's supposed to be like different cultural representations. Even at one point, the city of McAllen had an office right there. They had like a downtown manager of sorts. And it's interesting because the city of Brownsville and the city of Harlingen right now have downtown managers, like someone who works for the city and their entire job is to essentially promote economic development in you know, that part of the community. I don't believe that there is someone in that exact role at this time at the city. I think there's like perhaps like a retail manager of sorts is what I saw, but not the same focus, not the same concept. And, you know, basically for folks who aren't familiar, you know, there was a video that came out in August of McAllen police officer being, you know, assaulted is what the police said by someone that they identified as a minor on the street at night on a weekend. And, you know, city officials essentially said, well, this is the last straw. We're concerned about minors, you know, being served alcohol or having drinks in this area. You know, it's a safety issue. And, you know, they were very much taking a lot of different strategies to regulate that or attempt to regulate that, mostly in the civil realm. but really for potentially criminal activity. So since August, like I had even gone down to downtown McAllen, and you saw code enforcement on the street, questioning business owners during peak business hours.
I wanted to be clear. I know you're telling your part, but so August 24th, that was a Saturday going into Sunday. Monday, city meeting. That's what they emergency city meeting. And that weekend, and you were there that weekend. You saw the immediate aftermath, right? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to timeline it, and because you told us before we got started about that, so please tell your audience about exactly what you saw. So honestly, I quickly. If we defend ourselves and we kind of say, hey, this is what happened, it always sounds like defensive. So I would appreciate it. I know that it's about interviewing us, but what did you see that weekend? I would hope you would just share that with your audience.
Yeah, so the city had held a meeting, and a lot of the business owners had kind of talked about their experiences with downtown, and essentially the end of the meeting was the city was concerned and they wanted to increase regulation, right? And so they were certain that there was underage drinking happening, and so they wanted to essentially dissuade that, or keep that from happening. So that is typically like a criminal issue, but their strategy appeared to be very much on the civil side of it, because if y'all remember, these are all businesses operating within a specific district, and so they have these special use permits. There are other regulatory permits that are required at the city, whether it's your grease trap has to be a certain size if you are serving any kind of food, or have any type of organic matter in the facility, and also like occupancy and fire suppression and just kind of like basic public health and safety. So the city, for whatever reason, that weekend during the peak of people walking down the street and looking to have a good time and partying, you saw code enforcement alongside them, like in small groups, like in their uniforms with their they weren't what are they called?
The clipboards?
They weren't clipboards. They were like tablets or something, right? So they were out there with their tablets, and they were asking business owners to come out and give proof of licenses, or if they didn't, they would want to issue citations. And then the city came out and they were like, hey, we cited X number of bars and nightclubs during this time frame, and we could potentially raise $11,000 from the value of these citations that these businesses will have to pay, because they aren't following our civil code, basically. And it was pretty unusual. I've never actually seen anything like that before, and it kind of went on like this, to my understanding, for several weeks in a row, to the point where some bars that I'm told were trying to become compliant with the city's orders were apparently not doing it fast enough, or not doing it in the time frame or in the way that they wanted to, or maybe they didn't have enough money for the fines, in addition to having to remodel. And something that I've never seen before is that the city actually cut off electricity to some of these businesses, and so
12.
And it happened to you as well.
No, the irony there. I'm going to pass it on because it did happen to Bert. But
they cut the power lines. So you can cut power by telling AEP to electronically cut it off. You can take off the meter, which is back. Most people used to do that sometimes. But to actually physically cut the power lines, that's usually only assigned to the fire marshal's decision, especially when there's several buildings on fire. They might do that in an emergency to make sure that the fire is carried on. From what I understood, that it was illegal. There's no doubt that it is something that we could probably do legally. But by the time you win, you lose. You're throwing good money at bad money, and I think that was another disheartening thing that the city put us business owners in. Sue us, they put us in a situation where they intentionally did something that's wrong, and there's a certain term that you could use, and I wish I would know the law enough, but you can take the law to break.
I can do a good job on this point here. I'm just okay. So we through the Flying Walrus recently put up a GoFundMe for legal representation. The danger for me is that I can't get too particular, but what he's alluding to was basic principles of substantive justice and due process. Typically, if there's anything wrong with any business, inspector comes in, notifies you this is out of order, gives you a set amount of time to correct, which is called opportunity to cure, then follows up, and if you have not come into compliance, then cites you. This is typical business practice for any city in the country, and McAllen had always been that way. In this instance, because and you skated around it a little bit too, you have set event, you have automatic, very obvious escalation and enforcement. You were unwilling to say that they're related. It sounded like when you were talking, but the timeline's undeniable. That night, you talked about all the inspectors out there. There was also a presence of 25 plus police officers out there. There were probably 12 squad cars. There were 6 or 7 fire marshals. The fire chief was out there. The chief of police was out there. It in no uncertain terms, it was a parade. It was an obvious show of force. This kind of retaliatory, reactive politics. Now, I don't want to spend too much time delving into that because we both feel that mistakes were made. While the city's probably never going to make a public statement, mistakes were made. There has been some progress behind the scenes of at least the tacit acknowledgement that it could have been done better without saying we did something wrong. You see the difference, but it's still a step in the right direction. So I don't want to get too focused on mistakes that have been had. For me personally, just didn't feel like I didn't skate over it completely. I mean, I'm still in court. I'm still facing charges for things that were absolutely cured. And you talked about our power was cut. Actually, they cut 12 different venues. I remember the night I walked out and I had actually talked to them. That guy said, they cut our power. It's like, what? And we went out there and we had our show that Friday night and the whole street was black. Our power was not cut. Every permit was up to date at the Flying Walrus. We've always tried to do things the right way and work with the city. And things have popped up over the years, just like any other business. But honestly, we have a 14-year history of compliance. And that's why it was so upsetting when we were so immediately cited for things that we were either actively curing or could easily be cured in under 24 hours. It was kind of like a throw the baby out with the bathwater mentality. And up until now, I'm going to make it personal. I've been hesitant in my willingness to start I was asked by several people, hey, could you start an organization? If you recall it all back in September, I was very vocal in defending the Flying Walrus and what was going on and really calling the city out on some of the things that I saw that were wrong. I then began defending myself pro se. I've been defending myself pro se for over 4 months. I've filed letters everywhere, Department of Justice, Texas Civil Rights Project, ACLU. I've really kind of tried to do things the right way, forming a record and not blasting on the internet and everything. So when I most recently posted about stuff, now they're like, well, what's going on? I think that the confusion for a lot of people has been that we've been fighting silently for the last 4 or 5 months. I I've been told maybe that was naive. I've been told maybe you should have fought more loudly. We should have launched a GoFundMe then. You should have done this or whatever. Hindsight's 2020, right? I mean, I was raised to try to be civil and to try to use the system and to try to articulate and try to work with people and try to be cooperative. As my grandmother used to tell me when I was growing up, you don't have to like everybody, but you should be civil with everyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was hardcore put into my system as a child. But I felt like that needed to be explained, but we're also here to talk about the Heart of McAllen. We're here to talk about
the future,
collaboration, moving forward, so that these things don't happen again.
But I think a lot of it has to do with getting the right people in office. There's not a lot of people that vote in McAllen. Our organization will probably have enough people to decide every election, in McAllen. So we're not just going to be a force for the bars. That's just compared to what we're working with as far as what the
make
downtown.
It only about 17. It's not just about 17.
We want people to realize that McAllen was on track, and we're just trying to get it back on track. And I think when people take accountability for the neglect, whether they're in office now or they're not in office anymore, that's going to determine the people that we put in office. Because I can call every commissioner on the phone right now and have a great conversation with them. The people that don't return my calls are the mayor and the city manager. Of course, the two people. So there's something there that's not right, that's delegating the commissioner court, because everybody knows what they did was underhanded and wrong. Now, for the record,
I don't know that everybody knows that. But
well, at least other
we feel that way for sure.
Well, I've heard it from them personally,
okay.
But they don't want to go on the record because they're scared. I have no idea what's going on with them, to be honest with you. But I do know this: I've seen commissioners come and go. So these are going to come and go in at least in my lifetime that I've seen. So I'm looking towards the future as this organization. But firstly, when the mayor took to social media and said we're going to make this 21 and over, and he wanted to enforce that, I sent him an email letting him know that's illegal under the state law. You're going to get sued by the attorney general.
I had similar conversations.
He did
with
not know,
commissioners,
as an attorney, that law had passed. Luckily, he did not do that. Luckily, somebody stopped him. I'm not sure who, but I sent them an email, and so we had a meeting. I'm not going to name who with, and they were said we're grateful because you would have made the city look like a fool, but instead of them saying thank you and talking about the minors and trying to solve that on a state level, we get our power turned off without any warning, without any due process. Now could they technically legally do that? You got to really bend the rules to have made that work with anybody if you get this in front of a judge. My whole point is I don't want to spend the next 2 years fighting that legally. I'd rather invest that money in the future of McAllen, in the community that I've given with 1/3 of my life. I mean, I've been in the entertainment business 44 years. In 20 years, I've been there at Cine, and I'm proud of the work we've done. Have we made mistakes and stuff that could be better? Yes, but we're not here to not take responsibility for things that the woulda, coulda, shoulda. We're here to look forward to the future, and we're willing to work with anybody from the city that thinks like that and not keep wanting to talk about a viral video. That's not the truth, because the truth is, as the police said, we're at the 40-year low of crime, the level being dropped in McAllen. You can't have it both ways and say that to be the cheerleader of McAllen, the mayor saying, don't come to McAllen, don't come to downtown, but yet tout that we're one of the safest cities. It doesn't jive.
Oh, that's a whole other thing right there.
Yeah. So something I thought was interesting too is that, the city of McAllen put out a request for proposals, right? So an RFP seeking a consultant essentially for a potential design or revitalization of McAllen's downtown. And, I'm told that they will have meetings, that they'll include voices of stakeholders.
There's a workshop scheduled for February 12th. I would invite you or anybody else that wants to be a part of it or feels like a stakeholder. I think the city, sometimes this gets missed, and it's something that we've discovered as we build the Heart of McAllen. At first, everybody wants to say pigeonhole it as 17th Street. This is bar venues, right? No, this is stakeholders with the vision to include right now they're proposing rezoning, but they're not proposing rezoning for 17th Street. They're actively and have been doing it for the last 2 years, rezoning all of McAllen. Up on the table this next week is what you would consider the historic downtown. The proposed rezoning will affect, and this is in no uncertain terms. I've seen the maps. I've been presented with the maps from Bicentennial to 10th, from Old 83, beyond Old 83, to basically the Expressway. So this is a large geographic area that's going to be talked about. And it's important that people be there on February 12th. And when I say about stakeholders, it's retail, office, apartment, a venue owner, property owner, or artist or otherwise invested person. You don't have to own a bar or own a shop or even be living there. If you feel like that part of McAllen's part of your life and your history, you too are a stakeholder. And so I would say that is February 12th. And if you don't mind, I think that's where this conversation needs to go. The three of us, we've spent so much time talking about the past. I don't want to live there. I don't think what we're doing within the organization wants to live there. That being said, that when you see like my GoFundMe and stuff like that and stuff, he said it was the reason that I'm fighting those things is not about vengeance or escaping accountability or getting out of something or something like that. I find fighting that and also hoping for a proactive future completely on the same page. And it's because what I'm fighting really is like, let's remember that this happened and make sure it doesn't happen again so we can all move together forward. So that we can understand, let's do this with process. Let's do this with intent. Let's do this with honest collaboration, honest conversation, clear intent. Like, this is what we want, and you don't do it. Due process, time, fairness, those type of things. And that's a much broader thing. But now, to get back, this zoning. This zoning is important. The way that it's laid out now is that there are 7 different kind of, or multiple overlay districts. You've talked about them. And it's not just the ECOD. The ECOD is what you keep talking about, and it stretches out over through what's known as there's a 17th Street district that's kind of whatever, but then there's the whole ECOD that kind of goes out, I think, to Hackberry or whatever. Who knows?
Yeah, but
it doesn't matter. The particulars don't matter. But there's several overlay districts. Well, the new proposed zoning is very blanket. It lacks direct, distinct overlay districts.
Oh, really?
This is an issue that I plan on bringing up personally to the city commission. I've already begun a paper that's mostly written that I've shared with others for their insights. The final paper will be presented on Monday. I've called it McAllen at a Crossroads. Nobody's saying that rezoning isn't the city's right to do so. Cool. You need to. Nobody's against regulation. Nobody's saying like that. But regulate with intent and with a purpose. Just throwing a blanket zoning proposal over an area that has traditionally been known to have key districts within it that deserve recognition. We're talking about a cultural overlay. We're talking about historic preservation. We're talking about retail. We're talking about office. We're talking about business district. We're talking about and the city's own writing, which was provided to us by the city. I have it in the car now. I'm sorry I didn't bring stuff to be prepared. Proposes 7 or talks about 7 different districts. Yet the plan, as far as I've seen it, says, boom, one uniform code. That lacks, and that's a problem. Not because we're defensive about the bars. Even if they pass this, they're not going to walk in the next day, okay, we rezoned, shut down. No, there would have to be conversations about certain bars being grandfathered. There'd be a conversation about, basic rights as a business. Like, sure, you've changed the zoning and we'll comply, but you're not going to come and shut us down. It's not about that.
Yeah, but I think what's important for you to note, that I'll let you note it, is the grant money the city's not going to be able to get because right. Just get straight to the point.
Okay, well, the biggest point. Well, no, there's so much about
Right,
it.
but
There's so much about it, and I mean that's the point of a podcast. Rather than just having a 5-second conversation, like here's the bullet points. The one of the biggest things that's popped up in my mind as I put together this paper, and it'll all be relevant then, is when you don't take the time to be intentful about development within your community, specifically in the culture and the arts, when you move forward, and I think that this paper is not like, hey, I got you. What it is it's going to be, hey, calm down. Nobody's saying you can't change things, but here's a few things that you might have overlooked. Namely, if you don't designate areas in the overlay, you've now tied the hands of yourselves and future administrations as it goes for federal and state funding. That means you won't be able to be involved in the Texas Cultural Districts Project. You won't be able to get arts specific funding, both federal and Austin, because those programs usually give to districts and with a concerted effort. Like, this is our arts district. This is where we're going to use the funding. This is how it's going to get used. Well, this new overlay that they are not overlay, but this new proposal ignores all of those distinctions. So by accident, or just because, sometimes the obvious escapes people, you could be potentially tying the hands of not just yourselves, but the incoming administration. And that's something that needs to be guarded against, and needs to be guarded against quickly. So we've been having conversations. We've alerted through our private meetings. We've been pretty careful about saying who we're talking to and we're not talking to.
We do have a liaison, but we're temporary liaison that we're communicating once a week.
Yeah, we're trying.
And we're going to have that advocated throughout our organization. As long as we're an organization, we want to meet with the city once a week. We have found that it helps keep everything in order. I think me and James met with the city, both the city manager and assistant city manager last year. We thought we had a great conversation. A year and a half ago. Yeah, great conversation. And then everything went crazy. So I realized we got to almost keep meeting with these people because they give you the feeling like, we got you, we're going to help you. And I guess that's a politician way to do business, but we realize you almost have to keep them in check because they do got so many things they're worried about. And even though we feel Heart of McAllen is very important to the city of McAllen, there's all kinds of growth in McAllen, and we want all those people to be represented. But we also want people to remember that we have been neglected for whatever reason, and we just want them to get back on track. And that's our main focus, because the heart of the city, the original fans, Phase 1 and Phase 2, and like you talked about, they talked about this new plan. It's not a new plan. It's an old plan. It's over 20 years old. It's a plan that was handpicked for some reason, but they're ignoring Phase 1. And I think it's very important for them to say, or somebody to say, an investigative reporter perhaps, how can you go to Phase 2 when you never finished Phase 1?
To expand on not finishing Phase 1, he's talking about in the original Heart of the City planning, when he was talking about the parking lots that never came, the cultural investment, they were talking about bringing in college or STCC campuses and having them downtown. They were talking about expanding and building another library downtown. They were talking about further investment of arts. They were talking about upgrades within the roads, the alleys, security lights, etc. downtown, signage, wayfinding, ride shares. I mean, the list really is quite extensive. But the whole thing, for whatever reason, we don't know, the ball got dropped. And it got dropped 15 years ago. And in the danger of going back to saying, let's not talk about the past, what you saw after August 24th was kind of like a reaction to, hey, nothing, this has been allowed to run amok. But it got allowed to be run amok because there was no city involvement. There was no commitment. There was no, let's go work on the next project. Oh, well, downtown still needs to get fixed. No, let's go build a theater off Ware Road. Well, downtown still needs money and needs to be developed. Oh, well, let's go work on the next project. So there hasn't been a concerted effort in upgrading and developing the core of McAllen, and it's really just something that's super obvious to everyone for 15, maybe even 20 years, not real. Not real substantial, kind of like this needs to be upgraded. This needs investment. This needs our attention. And so when he talks about the Bowie Reservoir and about that being the second phase of it and not finishing the first phase, he's talking about how are you working on yet another project? Here's your downtown, where your city hall is, right next to your Chamber of Commerce, where most of your city officials have their offices. Yet you've neglected it and you continue to neglect it. And now you're on to your next project? Mm-hmm. And so that's a concern. Mm-hmm. And now I'll get a little bit fired up. But it's really, the reason that I would say it with a little more emotion and I can get concerned is because it's something I believe residents of all of McAllen should ask. Hey, when are you going to actually own and take care of this? And not make another, like he's talked about, I talked to this person or we had this conversation or whatever, and they pat you on the back and say, we're going to get to that, Bert. We're going to take care of it. No, and not placate, but an honest, clear plan, dialogue, hey, and then concerted effort to invest and say, we want this. We're going to build this. We're going to own this. Because what happened really post August 24th, and I'll call it what it is, nobody was owning 17th Street for over a decade. Nobody was really doing the job you would want them to do. So God bless the city of McAllen for getting on it now. I'm not going to fight about how mad I am or not mad I am for coming in and trying to fix it. But you haven't finished fixing it. You haven't, that big regulatory punitive, yes, it looked, you got on and you went to the Monitor and you went to the SA Times and you got on Channel 5 and you said, hey, the community wanted us to do something, so we did it. There's been a culture of disregard for too long. These are direct quotes. We went because they were demanding it. Direct quote. Cool, big, political, awesome, gets people fired up on the internet. Job not done. Job not done. That was the start.
You know, I understand that the business organization has gone to the city with essentially like a 10-point
proactive solutions moving forward.
Yeah, if you could highlight maybe some of those for the public that, you know, y'all are sort of proposing as, you know, ways to improve the area from the business community.
Number one on that list, you already talked about. It was a downtown liaison, coordinated effort. The city's own paperwork, and I say the city's own paperwork because they only recently said, hey, look at this. They handed it to us and digested it. Talks about BIDs, which is business and direct investment, like kind of a group that would do exactly what you're talking about, a downtown manager of sorts. We also talked about what we did with our 10 points, 10 proactive points when we presented. It was Aziz Showery who introduced the Heart of McAllen to the city a week before last. And he's a great guy, by the way. But he was introducing, he said, but by the way, I'm not just here to say, hi, guys, here we are. Let's get this ball rolling. Here's some ideas. Now, we've got far more ideas to throw into the plane. That's what we've been talking about in our closed meetings. But the 10 proactive points were just like, here's 10 things that you could do tomorrow. And talking about liaisons, ride shares, improving security lighting, specifically along like Bicentennial and the alleys behind the area. When they talk about crime, yes, that viral video was on the street. That most of the crime you hear about is happening where? Dark corners, dark alleys, off the actual street. It's happening around the corners, the periphery. So let's light it up. Let's clean it up. At least people tend to do shady things in shady spaces, right? That's just goes without a doubt. So if you want, I can provide you with that list as well, and I'll gladly hand it over to you. Did you want to expand on any of that?
No, I think, you know, I'm always being facetious about the lighting, but it just shows the neglect. And there's a broken window theory, and it goes to any community. If there's a broken window, there's going to be another broken window. Pretty soon there's going to be a lot more broken windows. I think that same theory can go to lighting. Now, these lights are paid for by the city of McAllen. They're just not on by AEP. All the city needs to do is let them know when these lights go off So there's no designated person to keep track of these lights that are off. So I'm the guy that always reports the lights that are off.
With a whole big paper you turned in one time with every single light marked on it. It was amazing.
I turned it in the first time with John Ingram, and they didn't get done. So I went to social media. That got our commissioner in, basically showed people. Now, it wasn't that John's a bad guy, or anything like that. He wasn't not representing our area. He never noticed that many lights were out because he never visits our area. A commissioner that's going to represent us needs to know our area. They need to be there on the ground every now and then to understand our area or understand our businesses. Now, we did get our lights on, but it took 6 years. So I used to tease him, how many commissioners does it take to get a light bulb? Now it's like, how many years does a commissioner need to get a light bulb screwed on? Of course, I was being facetious. I appreciate that, I do know he's running for an election. He's trying to get our approval or whatever. But my whole point was 6 years later is not going to help us as businesses, because then the broken window theory starts kicking in. And so when you're going to let a downtown area, every alleyway, except for mine right now, lights have been out since 2015. I'm just estimating because that's when I started noticing them out. Now, you can call 311, you can call McAllen, but it's AEP is saying that the city, a designated person from the city needs to call them. I can't call AEP to get those lights on because they're paid by the city. And there's
a lot of passing the buck, a lot of, oh, well, you need to call this guy, you need to call that guy. They tell the city to tell this guy. So we get to that point is, who is that one guy? Who is, so that he's not, because he is friends with four of the commissioners, probably on a friendly, like they've known each other since they were kids, some of them. And so he's calling 1, 2, 3 commissioners. I'm over here writing a letter to the city manager. I got 2 other bartenders over there. They're calling the chief of police. They're calling downtown planning. You got 15, 20 people calling 30 different people. And you would think that you just did, like, you fire enough shotgun pellets, somebody would take up the mantle. But honestly, nobody has taken up the mantle, because it's when there isn't a single addressed person, focal point that you could talk to, it's always too easy to say that's somebody else's job. It's just the world we live in. Everybody's busy. I'm not mad at people for being busy, but unfortunately with government, so it's not just about McAllen, there's always somebody else you can say, well, that's his job. Yeah, well, you know what? You know who you need to talk to? You need to talk to Felicia in accounting. Like, you've been steered this way in other parts of your life. And unfortunately, that's been the experience with everyone. And so, yeah, to give it that focus, what you alluded to with Brownsville and other cities, really all throughout the state, they have those like nighttime mayors. They have that direct liaison. And now the whole argument's, not that this isn't an argument, but the whole conversation is starting to find a little bit of focus here, because like he talked about the original Heart of the City plans. Now we're going back to that. In 2006, that Heart of the City plan that encompassed large segments of McAllen also called for an organization within the city that was stationed right there that you talked about. And that was the Heart of City Administrative Office that was supposed to have city funding. And when did that funding disappear? 2012, 2013?
Yeah, the nonprofit was dissolved in 2012.
Right. So when you start thinking about downtown, and you start thinking about when did this bad kind of stigma start taking hold? When did it start? Where has it gotten? And you try to give it a timeline. That date, you remove the city involvement in what they're doing and what they're building, kind of sticks out. From this point on, there was a slow, I don't know what the word, it's not escalation, but degrade, slow
like
de-evolution,
decline.
Slow decline, where the ultimate end of that decline was what downtown looked like the day before that event. Like, don't talk about that event. Talk about what did it look like the day before that event. Well, that was the ultimate end. This was that catalyst. This was that like the fire that set off all the dynamite, right? But that dynamite was sitting there not because of this issue. Not because, I mean, that incident looked horrific on a video, whatever, got a lot of people stirred up. But what was everything that led up to that? What about everything that existed within the community or was neglected within the community that allowed this to even be an issue or escalate to this point or ever happen? And so I'm always telling us, like, hey, let's not talk about the past anymore. But Bert's actually done a good job because in our private conversation, Bert cares a lot about history. Well, a lot.
We have a foundation separate from the theater.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's called Preserving the Past for the Future. And so I know something like this happens, and I'm not trying to be very spiritual, but it's for me to understand and go through things. So I could either learn from it and share it with other people. So the people in Brownsville, the people in Harlingen, the people right here in Edinburgh, hopefully you look at the mistakes that the city of McAllen made in the past and don't make them, because right now y'all are exciting many people, especially the people in Weslaco and Alamo, with your downtown revitalization. And I think it's very important for your success to learn from the mistakes that we suffered from. Now, we're not going to go anywhere as far as this national landmark and as far as the Flying Walrus and the whole spirit of the Heart of McAllen. But I want those city leaders in those towns to know that
don't be talking to the people in Brownsville, right?
Thanks for interrupting. I'm talking to the people in Brownsville, Alamo, Harlingen, of course, here in Edinburgh, where downtown revitalization has inspired me. It's nice to see the Citrus open again. I remember it was dormant for 40 years. Yeah. And now you got, hopefully, the theater, it's a Majestic, right, in Brownsville. I forget the name. I'm sorry.
I think it is, yeah. Because UTRGV is going to revitalize that. And, you know, I've done stories about the efforts in Brownsville and Harlingen, and, you know, they have like economic incentives for, you know, like new restaurants and, you know, retailers in their downtown area. And in Harlingen, they're very focused on, like, they just did a comprehensive plan where they're going to, like, open up sort of a public plaza and turn some vehicular streets into pedestrian only. And, you know, it's just really interesting to kind of see, you know, that.
You know what's so ironic, and I think you can talk to a lot of these people, the Heart of the City plan is where a lot of these people drew their ideas from. Now, they got their own city planning, but that's how much inspiration that these plans that were developed in 2004 inspired so much of the Rio Grande Valley. Look how long it's taken for them to even get to the front door, though. So these are very incremental changes. It's not going to happen overnight. I feel like the ball was dropped. We weren't carrying it, you know. I felt like the city was there. You know, we were just in the grind of running a business. You're not really looking up sometimes. You're just focused on just staying in business. So for us to take this up, I know for James and me personally, it's taken away from my family. My dad's 84. We have a ranch in Fremont. And if it was up to me, I would just like to be over there. But I have to be at a meeting or arranging stuff or meeting with other people or trying to make sure that the people that we want to be part of our organization. And sometimes I'm like, is that what I want to do with the time that I could spend with my father while he's alive, you know? And so I want people to know that this is very personal in the sense of how much time we have to do this. I shouldn't be doing this, but unfortunately, because of the situation we are in, my goal as Heart of the McAllen is just to let the citizens know that this comprehensive plan that we paid for was very well thought out. In fact, it should have been completed in 2005. That's how, if you look, it says by 2005, we're going to have all these things completed.
2025.
2025, thank you.
Yeah, okay. It was the completion date was last year.
Yeah,
yeah, but it got dropped.
If you read it, they're going to say by 2005, this is where we should be at. And of course, those are goals. I get it, and sometimes they don't work out. But I just reading the new version of the economic study. They said it was an economic study, and I was just like, my daughter could do this with AI. I wasn't impressed with it. But at the same time, it wasn't
nearly as comprehensive as what he had sent you with the Heart of the City stuff.
Okay, and that's what the city's putting out right now, or
they are proposing to bring in somebody else, third party, to do some sort of, it hasn't been clearly described. I'm going to let them do it. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but some sort of at least study or assessment or third-party evaluation of what needs to be happening downtown, which is another, I want to say red flag. Well, I don't want to say it's another red flag per se.
Open overnight.
But, and I think it needs to be addressed on that February 12th, which is just coming up. You've already said that you're going to hire a third party to give you insight, studies, information, opinions that should weigh into your decision. Cool. I support that. And honestly, because sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us. We need that third party to come in and kind of guide us. I think that makes sense, something that I could get behind, something I could advocate for. So my question is, isn't rezoning now before you've had time to assess from a third party's evaluation? Isn't that kind of getting the cart before the horse just a little bit? In my mind, it just kind of seems like an obvious yes, right? Like, let's table this for a little while, at least. Let's consider the things that we've talked about, the overlay districts, how we could be tying our own hands for future generations, for future administrations, as far as federal and state fundings. What it is that we actually want from our downtown, because giving it this blanket zoning fits all kind of attitude, it's not realistic of what exists there.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and I wonder if y'all have insight. I've noticed there's quite a few like for sale signs and like a couple like vacant properties in downtown right now.
Just a few?
Well, there's even a it looked like sort of like an outdoor music venue that somebody.
You talking about the Yard on Dallas, Chicago at 17th?
I think so. Yeah, and it was,
it was a really cool idea.
Somebody spent a lot of money on remodeling all of that and renovation. I've never seen it open, since I relocated back here. But it's just interesting to see, like, why do you think there is, like, unused property or vacant property in downtown today?
Quite honestly, it's always been hard to make money downtown. And it's maybe except for in that very beginning golden age heyday. And it's really been driven largely by that race to the lowest common denominator mentality. It's just economic sense. If you and I and Bert, we said, hey, that's the three of us, let's start a real estate project, right? And we said, we're going to have 20 units in this thing. Okay, cool. What are we going to do? First, we're going to find our cornerstone left business and our cornerstone. We're going to get two major businesses to lock it down. Boom, we got number one. Boom, we got number two. We're going to have 18 in the middle. You know what we're not going to do? We're not going to have 18 Starbucks in the same shopping center. We're not going to have 18 nail salons back to back to back to back to back to back to back. What we've done downtown, for better or for worse, and whether it could have been guided or whatever, you've got 18 bars, one DJ. It's like you go into one bar and into the other, and it's the exact same music. You wonder what the heck's going on. That leads to that inevitable race to the lowest common denominator. It's real easy, and unfortunately, I guess this mayor more than anybody else kind of like demonize a lot of the bar owners in some of the statements. It's real easy to do that, but the truth is, nobody ever, dare I say, has ever opened up a bar, a nightclub, a restaurant in any city and said, here's my business plan. I'm going to sell to minors and sell $2 shots. No, you automatically go out of business instantly. But when you have 18 people doing exactly the same thing right next to each other, it's a race to the common denominator. Everybody started off with good intentions, or you hope, for the most part. Then, oh man, sales aren't quite what they should be. Well, let's drop the price on this beer and see if it helps. And the next guy's like, well, now they're charging a $3 beer over here. Hey, let's do a $2. Then it's just this lowest, you race to the bottom because everybody's trying to do the same thing, going after the same concerted effort. This is just practical application of what happens with supply versus demand. It's evident on this. This is not me speculating. This is exactly what happened downtown. Race to the lowest common denominator. That's why actually paying attention, cultivating, investing in ways, and diversifying the forms of entertainment was actually important. But there was never any steward to the ship. The ship was allowed to be set sail. The reason you would think, well, if nobody's ever making any money downtown, how are there always so many bars down there all the time? And I'll tell you, the thing is, because so much of the investment was put up front when it first got built. When you first convert this building into a bar or nightclub, right in the beginning, it's going to cost a lot as far as getting up to grade with fire sprinkler systems, getting up to grade with electrical systems, bringing up all the permitting. Now you go out of business. The next guy, it's going to cost him a hell of a lot less because the previous guy has previous tenants taking care of all the upgrades. So the initial investment to get yourself started downtown is way less than it would be to go into an empty shell or an undeveloped property. So basically, there is an endless sea of people with $50, $75, $100,000. Endless sea. Say, I want to open up a bar. How much is it going to cost? $60,000. Okay, let's give it a shot. Doesn't work, they're out. But then here comes that domino again, that race to the bottom again. Well, why isn't it working? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, the bartenders are stealing. Oh, it's going down. Anywhere else, if I came here to Edinburgh and they say, people ask me about the Flying Walrus all the time, why don't you get up and move? Because it's not going to cost $100,000 to move the Flying Walrus. I'm going to have to build from the ground up somewhere. It's going to cost me $800,000, $900,000, $1.2 million, $1.5 million to completely relocate and rebuild it. It's not moving. That is not that easy. I'm illustrating what happened in the past and what's been currently happening. But it's also, this is a good and bad thing. The infrastructure is there because it's built up over the last 15 and 20 years. Most of these buildings, as much as everything was about code, by the way, and not to correct you too much, but earlier you were talking about civil versus criminal. It's really not civil, it's administrative, right? They were using administrative. They were making it about permits. They were making it about ordinances. And to play devil's advocate in their defense, these were the tools they had, right? Like this is the toys they can play with. And so we can't really go do all this other stuff, but we can get everybody for code. So they were kind of using what they could use, and that's my excuse for them. But large part, most of the foundation for these things exists there. That's why it's going to be so hard for Edinburgh. As much as it's exciting to see these things, it's going to be so hard for other cities, for Harlingen, because they are a decade behind as far as the infrastructure. It costs a lot of money to walk into a building that used to sell dresses and turn it into a bar or restaurant. It doesn't cost a lot of money for somebody that had been an operating restaurant for 10 years and turn it into a bar, or a bar into a restaurant or whatever. Those things, it's just talking about dollars and cents. It's easier. Problem is, you can't continue doing this one-size-fits-all economic plan where you allow, going back to the real estate development project idea, you can't have 18 Starbucks in a row. You can't have 18 nail salons in a row. It won't work. You'll have 18 people go out of business.
So now looking forward and to kind of like bring this together, we have the city interested in sort of reimagining, right, downtown. They're bringing in this consultant. There's the element of the rezoning that, could be delayed at some point or worked into whatever the consultant recommends, and there's these stakeholder meetings, and y'all are now a business association, right? You're sort of getting yourself a seat at the table. You've come up with this, 10-point solution ideas to improve this area. And I just kind of wonder, what what might be next? Like, do you anticipate, like, sort of a true revitalization and maybe a fresh start with, compared to 6 months ago?
Well, we've begun some of these closed meetings. Nobody's trying to be coy here, but we've had our talks. We're just not saying exactly who was in the room or whatever, because I don't know. I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
I think what's interesting, we were having our meeting, and this person who's been our liaison said, "Who invited the press? If you're going to invite the press, we're not going to have these meetings." I didn't invite him. James didn't invite him. Anyway, but I was shocked how offensive she got. I should have said that.
Dude.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is our meetings are open to everybody, the press. And sometimes you'll see us going back and forth.
Talk about our Heart of McAllen meetings. We hold them on Wednesdays at the Flying Walrus every 6:30. If you consider yourself a stakeholder, if you're part of the press, if you are hearing about this Heart of McAllen organization for the first time through your podcast, you can find us every Wednesday, Flying Walrus, 6:30. And so what he was talking about is when we were having this closed meeting, a member of the press showed up, and there was some concern in the room, like, hey, if we're going to be inviting press, I don't want to have these meetings anymore. Nobody within our group had actually invited the press, but our meetings are meant to be informal but organized. That's why we said we're not the board members. We're not anything like that. It's all been to be as inclusive as possible to get the vernacular going. Yeah, eventually there'll be a board, and it'll all be but until we see a little more of the foundation built and we get more players, because the thing about McAllen that gets overlooked, and I think now I'll talk bad about the city for a second. I feel that unfortunately sometimes the resources of the city of McAllen are not all about money. Like, its people have a lot to give. And it's not easy to know exactly who those people are. So really we're in the stage at the Heart of McAllen of kind of accumulating those interested persons. Every time we hold a meeting, a new person walks in and say, hey man, I heard you're doing this. I want to get involved. Hey man, how can I do something? Hey, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And unfortunately, up until these recent closed, it's kind of been like, it's felt to us anyway, I can only speak on our end, that it was city of McAllen sitting up like in an ivory tower and we couldn't talk to them. Right?
Well, that's the way they made us feel.
That's the way they made us feel.
The commissioners never made me feel like that, just for the record.
Oh, yeah. Oh, on the side they did it. Not when you went and talked to them and said, hey, buddy, without calling anybody out. There's a couple that I've talked to personally. I was like, hey, it was always like, I got you. We're going to get this figured out or whatever. But then we waited for something real.
Yeah.
Something before the committee. And we were like, well, where is it? What's happening?
I think a lot of people in our area, in the Heart of McAllen, which, just for the record, it goes from Hackberry to Highway 83, from 10th to Bicentennial. So it overstretches a little bit of what the ECOD is. I assumed the ECOD covered that, and it doesn't. And they explained that they had changed that, but I didn't even know they changed that. So there's a lot of things that have changed, and I didn't even know about the changes. That I was kind of embarrassed because I like to think I keep up with stuff. Mm-hmm. So it just goes to show you that, a person in business, and luckily a lot of the people, they believe in what we're doing. They're behind it. They just don't have the time or the resources to even participate in a meeting. So I do know that trying to organize people, people just want to know, can you go take care of this for them? And so I'm realizing, just letting people know we're trying to organize. Now, I know we talked a lot about, quote, 17th Street, the entertainment district, but there's so much more there than the Heart of the McAllen is going to represent.
It's easy to get lost on the 17th Street being all about the downtown or whatever, because that's the most immediately aggrieved group. Mm-hmm. But like he's saying, it's really so much more. And this zoning proposal on February 12th is not going to be rezoning for downtown. It's rezoning for the retail, for the apartments, for us as well, for the entire area. So you should at least, like he's saying, he just learned. There's an exchange of information on both sides. the two main terms that brought up, or I made a point of bringing up in our first closed meeting: collaboration, transparency. And up until recently, I feel like we had really, am I fair to say that there have been none?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can testify to that because I like to call it the trenches. I've been in the trenches, but I don't want to look at this as a game of war against our own city. And I realize sometimes it's just the temperament starts from the top up. You know, I think a few key words of compassion towards a young kid instead of being so hard on a minor. We don't know the facts. I think once you look up the facts, you're going to realize he didn't go to any place. He had no alcohol in the system.
Oh, we might as well just go ahead. You might as well just go ahead and expand on that.
But then the thing is, there was a second incident where, unfortunately, they were at some place and supposedly they were drinking underage. But unfortunately, the person who was probably responsible for that
don't
passed away.
Yeah.
So what more can you do to somebody to punish them? Now, you can blame the bars. We don't know what happens. I do know when you go to our venue, you're going to have a person underage ask for orange juice. They might ask for, a Coke. And so from a camera, look, they poured that minor something, So it could be confusing if you just look at cameras. But I treat every kid that comes in there as if they're my own, and into this venue. Many of the people that work for the city of McAllen, I remember when they were 16, 17 years old. Now they're in their pushing 40, And so I see them now in offices that I got to go to. So I know they know what we're about. But unfortunately, there were some bad apples in the entertainment district. But just like there's bad commissioners and there's bad mayors and city managers, doesn't mean that you should railroad all of us, And that type of disconcern is not good leadership. I think they need to be more surgical or could have been more surgical. But we as an organization want to move forward to let them know that we want to make sure that we have a constant communication weekly, which we've been doing. And this includes with our police chief. So we're trying to have meetings that are going to be bi-weekly just to make sure that if there's things that we're concerned about, one of the things that we want to push for is for a substation underneath the parking garage. The police already kind of hang out there. I'm not sure what they do. They have like a garage area where they have their cookies and donuts and stuff. Cookies and donuts. But I would like that to be a substation with just cameras galore of all downtown. So one person can be monitoring 24/7 the econ system and to make sure that it's safe. And if there's an incident, there's recorded data. Let's say a car theft or any type of burglary to any of these businesses that we can keep track. I think that's the type of policing that is better. Because it's all there. Now, some people might say, well, nobody wants to be filmed 24/7, but I think those are things that we can look at as a community, put them on a referendum and vote on that and see if there's a budget to do that. But I think those are the things that we can do now, And if you look into 2008 of the city budget, there was a budget to put cameras downtown in 2008.
Really?
Yes. We have to go back and look at all these budgets. Sometimes things get spent, and then all of a sudden they got appropriated for other things. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, downtown was supposed to get 3 parking garages. One for the entertainment district, which was priority. They built it first. 2 more garages were supposed to get built for more of the retail side.
To help the retail.
Simon Mall asked the city, we need parking garages. And so that's where that money went. That was supposed to be for downtown. Now, Simon Mall brings a tremendous amount of income to the city in tax dollar. Even the money that we did give them was probably a smart decision, but it also took away the livelihood of what we're doing. The reason retail in downtown is suffering is because of parking. I'm pretty sure if those plans would have stayed, the foundation of downtown would have been stronger. And maybe Simon Mall could have paid for their own parking. I mean, it's hard to look back and see what could have fixed this, or maybe is that where they started neglecting downtown because they stopped doing what they were supposed to do. Those are a lot of what ifs. There are a lot of people that are not in office anymore. You would have to go back and look at minutes. You have to go back and look at budgets.
Which goes back to that, it's always on somebody else's kind of thinking. It's unfortunately, we got to get past that. It's kind of too easy for a city commissioner or you got to remember this city manager. He's only been city manager for a short while. it's always very easy to say, well, that didn't happen under my watch. That was somebody else, or that was the previous mayor, or whatever. Because we as citizens, we sometimes make the mistake, fair or not, or whatever. We think of like, well, the city of McAllen did this, the city of McAllen did that, and then you've got this mayor, this commissioner, or this city manager. Like, but I wasn't here when that happened. You know, so he keeps talking about the econ, the heart of the city, these plans in the past and such, whatever, and that they're there. But of course, if somebody gets they're about to have a new city commissioner for District 5. The moment they get sworn in on May 3rd or May 6th, whatever day it is, they cannot be expected to be abreast of all the information from the previous 20 years, right? It's important. It's impossible. So it's also important in these closed meetings. We're usually there, 4 or 5 people, and it's not, just me or just Bert or just the two of us. There's other people involved because everybody's got something to give, a little information. And so it's not bad when the other person says, well, I didn't even know. It's fine to not know a thing. It's not excusable to
when you do know about it now.
When you're willfully ignorant or you're not doing your due diligence to know. So rather than accusing people of either of those, let's continue these conversations. Let's be open in our dialogue. Let's make an attempt to be collaborative. Let's have these open meetings, because only then are you really going to get access to the information that you need. Only then will you might be aware. Only then are you going to have your ha-ha points or points, because no matter what, if you keep it to a core group and keep so much of the community out or in the cold as you're making decisions, while that can be an efficient mechanisms to get things done, I understand that when you keep a core group and get it done that way. What it does do is it bears also the effect that so many considerations never make themselves known. You cannot be aware of what you don't know.
And so what would y'all like to see, or the business organization would like to see here moving forward in the next 6 months, in the next year? What could downtown become? And just to wrap up.
Well, for me, signage is very important. All the structure to put the signs are there, but there's no signs. When we asked about that, they said they withered away. That was the term they used, that they were old and they're just... But we asked about getting replaced. We would like to celebrate Christmas, make sure there's Christmas decorations in the downtown area like there have traditionally been since McAllen was founded. And we would like to also do certain things that have worked in the entertainment district, which is Halloween. Be a safe environment for people to come and park their cars and take their kids trick-or-treating, not just to the entertainment area, but to the whole downtown. Same thing with Christmas. We want to work more with toys for tots and giveaways, so where all the businesses downtown could have toys available. And so whoever wants to participate in the program, again, that'd be part of the Heart of the City. These are all going to be annual events that we could do. These are things that used to be done, but they got stopped doing. I know Cine already, we used to show free Christmas movies during that time and give away bags of fruit and stuff like that. So those are things that it's kind of like a domino effect. The city's not doing it. Why are we doing it? And it does cost money, to buy candy and do things. So we want to work with groups that already do these type of things. And I think that's going to be because we can do that immediately. We can start working on stuff like that now. So the signage is number one. We never got our welcome to the entertainment district. That was probably the first thing I thought they were going to do, and never got done. So I want to look at the things that we can do immediate, because then people can feel better about, wow, they're paying attention to us. And I want the stakeholders to feel, because the big investment that they want to make about making the sidewalks bigger or making certain things, that's going to take years, and it's going to take a lot of money, and it's not going to happen now. And they're probably going to be gone by the time that happens. And guess what? Somebody's going to drop the ball, and maybe it never happens. So we need to find out what's immediate that we can do and that can make us feel they're paying attention to us. And I think the signage is the most important, to let people know, oh, we're on Main Street, and this is what Main Street's about. Oh, Broadway. Because Hermes Music probably pays some of the most taxes in McAllen. When you go from the equipment, I'm production guy. I've known them since I used to buy my equipment back in 1982, so some of the first equipment my dad bought me was from there. And so to see the store still there and see the store pay the tax dollars, but not have the representation and have their lights out in front of their store out and have to advocate to get their lights on. And it's because they're older too. They're not as active in participating in government anymore. So I do know that they recognize as some of these business gets older, somebody else has to pick up the baton. And I do know that there was another organization before that tried to start, and it was called, something Downtown Bar Association. We did not participate in that because I said, I'm not going to do it unless it includes everybody. Mm-hmm. So this was the same way when I was brought to Aziz and James. I said, the only way we're going to be part of this as historic Cine Ray, if it includes everybody, because that's how we win. I don't want people thinking we just care about ourselves, because if I did, I could sell the building and live off interest, and just be selfish. But I do know that building means so much to the Hispanic culture in America, and especially in McAllen. You used to go to Mexico City, and it had a picture of McAllen, and there was a little picture of Cine Ray. It symbolized in McAllen, just like the Alamo does for San Antonio, to Hispanics in America because of all the Hispanic actors that used to tour with the movie. So a lot of people forget about that type of history, but the people that do remember Cine remember for Cantinflas and Tintin and Pedro Infante and Sarah Garcia from the Alberti with a Chocolate, all touring with the movie, making personal appearances. So when you talk about Tejano stars, they all say the same thing. I wanted to get on that stage because that's where I saw Pedro Infante. You talk to Carlos Guzman, I got inspired to be a singer because of that. But now what do we got now? We have new bands playing modern music, participating in the American dream, because it's not just in Spanish, because this is our bicultural, very complex area, and this area represents it. It is not, I know we used to host an open mic prior to when they started taking over the open mic. We don't host it anymore. I used to personally host it. We don't do it anymore.
You used to play almost
yeah,
every
I
night.
used to play. But I also like the fact that it inspired people to continue it because it was so much fun to make music, like a conversation, improvised music.
I will tell you, when we first kind of took up the mantle on it, Julian, before we talked about how we wanted to do it, he specifically referenced what you guys. I remember when I was 21, and that's where I would go to Cine with Bert over and what they were doing. He goes, I love what I do. That's where my heart is. I want to do it bigger. I want to do it better, and I want to keep that same soul. And the reason that I say that and it's important is because he succeeded at that time in what he wanted to do, encourage others to take on the mantle, right?
And this ain't about venues fighting with each other, saying, no, I only do that. I think that's what I really like about the live music scene, the bands and the venues. There's not a competitive, I do know, I'm not trying to throw dance clubs under the, but they do have a competitiveness to it. And I noticed that can kind of hinder, like, I'm going to send in the minors just to screw them over and call the police. And, there's a lot of weird stuff like that going on with them where they're actually being set up. So here it's all about...
a little more vindictive than it tends to be in the arts and culture and music communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But look, I remember John Ingram, and if you're listening, I hope you're doing well. But one time I went to City Hall and I was talking about something. He goes, if you don't like it, move. That was his. I said, I can't move a national landmark. I'm stuck there. I'm part, that roots of that theater are going to be there long after I'm gone, and I want it to be there. And I want to make sure it stays independent. I love that idea that it's not controlled. Any young kid that wants to get on the stage probably has an opportunity to. Any independent promoter doing music that's not part of mainstream or Live Nation or any of these things. I have to admit, when Live Nation made that offer to us, it was almost like a blessing, I thought, because we thought we were going to go out of business because we had not had income for 4 months. And so when that happened, the decision at the last minute came, McAllen will lose its identity. The people will lose something that's theirs, So I hope the leadership of McAllen understands that sacrifice that we're doing so it stays part of McAllen, and hopefully in the future, just like UTRGV bought Mystique, I don't know, maybe STC takes on the Cine Ray, something that's going to make sure they keep it together, because you can only do so much as an individual and running a business, like the way you do. But unfortunately, the convention center, any great art, even the Kennedy Center, you run in the negative. It's tax-based. That makes a lot of these venues successful. We're not tax-based. So, but we're independent. But I like the fact that we're still here and we're still advocating not just for us, but for other people. And we're inspiring people to do what we've done in other venues and take that, like I want to do what they did at Cine. And I like that inspiration. And I'm hoping that, again, I can't say enough. I hope Brownsville succeeds with their downtown revitalization. I do know that there's a lot of hard things coming together, but I hope they work as a community and stay on track. Because once you get off track, everything can falter, as we have been victims of, I would say. Now,
it's easy to get derailed when you talk about specifically like to Brownsville. It's easy to get derailed by the viral highlights, by the negativity that will come with you in Brownsville as you expand. We've had our history of it through and throughout. But as those snapshots take the focus, you want to be sure that you don't lose and forget about all the stuff Bert was talking about, the cultural underlining of all of it. When you're busy looking at like, hey, look at this. Well, what about all of this? Mm-hmm. And that's what Bert's talking about. And I do want to actually take the mantle from you here, Bert, because you talked about things that can be done now. And he's talking about the culture and stuff like that. Well, another one that can be done is that the city of McAllen is long past due taking a direct kind of interest in cultural and arts development within its own downtown. And that's going to take actual funding and dollars. That's why it's so important when I talked about with the overlay districts, because as the city hopefully becomes more willing to say, hey, cultural development, arts, let's put 30 grand here, 50 grand here, 100 grand here, or whatever. You're going to want matching funds, federal, state, or otherwise. That's why those things are important. Again, that's why that February 12th and telling the city, hey, just slow down just a little bit before you throw the baby out with the bathwater here is so important. And as far as also other things that can be done now, all those security lights. He talked about the 6 or 5 security lights. That's just in the back of Cine. Basically, he raised so much hell that they got his lights on, which is great for right behind Cine, but what about the rest of all of downtown? So I'm pretty sure we can get the lights on. Let's do that as quickly as possible. When all this stuff started back in late August 24th, and the subsequent, even though it was all administrative, all ordinances, like you talked about, what it really was a public safety issue. This was about a 17-year-old in the street overtaking a police officer and running off. It was a public safety issue. So make it about public safety. Address that heads on. And how do you address that heads on? The lighting, the signage, clear and designated ride share and accessibility, Uber, Lyft, and getting people in and out. Exploring the more trolley system and community involved transportation for individuals from parking zones in and out, lighting up Bicentennial, adding surveillance. You have to analyze what the police are doing down there. I mean, I know that it's a hard job, but you obviously, by the incident, by all the stuff you're seeing like that, positioning them on Beaumont and 17th and on Chicago and 17th and sitting there, it's not an effective mechanism where people basically have to run to them to say something has happened. You know, hey guys, back behind the alley over here. Then they go respond. It's reactive policing. You need to think proactively. These are things that can be done next week, or at least the ball can be done and rolling next week.
I think it's very important to remember that's the state law that passed in 2023. People don't know that in 2023, the state of Texas did away with being able to enforce curfews. That's at the county or city level. The only way they can do it is in case it's a state of emergency issued by the government. So a lot of people don't know that. So sometimes when you see kids out that are underage, We are an all ages venue, but most of our events end at 12. And if you're under 17, you need to be accompanied with a parent or a legal guardian. That's our policy. And if you're underage, there's no, you can't, no reentry. So if you're underage, you come by. The problem with some kids is they'll have liquor in their car, or they'll have other things that they're doing in their car, and that goes for adults too. But so we don't do.
The only way to stop that is to police it, to actually be out in it. He can't stop a 17-year-old that's in at one of his shows from going out into the street and drinking 3 blocks away in their car. And we all know that's happening. You know, I shouldn't have to say it. It's all over the internet when they type in the comments.
But what I'm saying is that 17-year-old should not be out in the street after 11 p.m. And I'm all for that. You know, I think that's where it's misleading. Just because we're an all-ages venue doesn't mean we keep that 17-year-old to 2 a.m. We understand what audience we have for the Democrat. And I've done that for 20 years.
I just don't always.
But the governor has not helped this situation. And I think the governor needs to hear from our mayor and other mayors that are having problems. And for some reason, they're scared to even act for that law to be repealed. Because that should have been the first thing they should have done. It said, why is that minor out in public? Well, first of all, he has a legal right. Well, that law needs to change. That's the solution. Some of the things they're proposing were answers, but they weren't the solution. So we're still going to have a problem with minors until that law changes. And so anybody listening, I want you to look, that's SB 1819 that passed in 2023 in the state of Texas. And that's going to happen in Brownsville. It's going to happen here in Edinburgh. It is a situation where a person that's 12, 14, 10 years old can be out in the street at any time. And legally, there's nothing we can do to them. And sooner or later, these kids, they know about this loophole. And so kids they'll go to 17th Street and they'll just hang out, not go anywhere. Then they'll go to the cars, and then they come back out. And so that's the issue that we had the first time. If you look at the facts, that's the issue. That wasn't that they got served at a venue. So
it actually appears from, and I'm not going to verify it, I invite you to verify for yourself, but it appears that the irony behind that August 24th incident is that the 17-year-old that overtook the police officer was in no bar or venue that night. He was in none.
Because you asked them?
It's in the police report.
Because he was just a young, like a guy that he was out there looking for trouble. And he had every right to be there. So this was very much a public safety issue. And it got escalated because of the sensationalism of the viral incident into all the bars are serving. Nobody had served him. There's no video evidence whatsoever of him being served. And I mean, you can look to the day is long. He was in no bar that night.
Yeah, unfortunately,
it's interesting.
We tried, at least I tried to do back channeling communications with the mayor and the commissioner court, all of them, in one thread email to let them know, first of all, because I heard he was trying to implement a new situation to where you got to be 21 and over to enter.
I remember that, yeah.
They claim they didn't ever say that now, but
he literally just didn't know the law.
He didn't know the law. If they would have passed that, and there's attorneys that are commissioners.
He was alerted by the attorneys that work under him within the city's office.
I was told that
bud,
they didn't know.
What are you doing?
And they said, thank you for letting us know. And then everything changed.
So Isaiah wrote the letter to the city attorney.
To permits without us knowing. It went from, we're going to change the drinking age to 21 and over. I mean, people allowed to go into the entertainment district. And then a week later, if you don't have your permits, we're going to cut your power without due process, without letting us know. By phone or by email.
We don't want to go down that slippery slope of.
Well, they're going to say they sent us whatever, whenever, however. But my whole point is, I've been emailing you. You can call me. You can let us know if that's the situation.
But we're moving past that going forward. It's getting more productive, and hopefully we don't get buried in the back. But the thing is, the main focus point of this is everything that happened, the vernacular that was out there, that this was all about public safety. Whether it's minors or underage drinking or whatever, or drinking and driving, those are public safety issues. If you care about those issues, you need to address them head on. If you want to address them head on, how do you do that? You reevaluate how you're policing. You reevaluate surveillance. He alluded to it. McAllen continues to be the only city where its police officers do not have body cam technology. Edinburgh does, Mission does, Bar does. So does Harlingen. Donna, for God's sakes, has them, and so does Brownsville. McAllen, the most forward-looking, the jewel of the valley, if you want to call it, does not. You cannot, in my mind, say that you are the city with the lowest crime rate and advertise that, and then I say, okay, now prove it. And you can't. You can't prove it. Why? Because every report is internal. There's no outside validation of the numbers that are being put out. Those numbers are coming from the police department. If I can print my own numbers, I can say anything I want. And then when I say now validate your statement, if you don't have cameras, you just can't do that. But that's a whole other issue, but I can really get into that.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, what are you looking forward to?
God, man, I didn't want to finish like on that note. But especially Cine El Rey and Flying Walrus and a couple of the other ones, we do represent bars that have been there for a very long time that, honest to God, we're not really a part of some of the stuff that everybody was being accused of, because it was everybody's doing it, no discerning good or bad, no surgical look, like you were saying. Or how did you say?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it was what, like condemn all. They're all guilty. What we want to do, we've been sitting here for a long time watching these mistakes happen and suffering because of it and operating within it. Seeing it can't go anywhere. That's a historical building. Me on a personal note, have always been hopeful that the city was finally going to get back involved again. And we were going to see the downtown that he was promised. That's what makes us different.
Yeah, and
virtually every other owner down there does not have that history. They've been there for 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, 1. And because it's endemic of what we talked about much earlier in the thing, the constant overchange.
Well, I think when you make the investment that you did and I did, it takes you about 10 years just to get back to zero if you really made the investment to be a long-term business. So I think I feel bad for the newer businesses because the framework, they're set up to fail, basically. Like, it's easy to get in because everything's set up, but there's no support. Like even on the city's entertainment, it used to have a dedicated entertainment page. It's very vague now. It doesn't really even promote the entertainment district. So stuff like that, it's like, wait a minute, we're not even getting help from the city of this.
I messaged them directly, Explore McAllen.
Yeah.
I'll send them through DMs like, hey, this is what we have going on. And then, and honestly, whoever's working there now is good about grabbing it and posting it. But if I don't send it in, they have no clue what's going on.
Things like that needs to be heavily promoted before, I noticed, and stuff. It's unfortunate. I think what happens with social media, and of course, I remember when we first got involved in theaters, MySpace was very popular. I used to call them MySpace bands because I never heard of these bands, and it was sold out. Bands like All Time Low, I didn't even know who they were. They went on to become kind of big, and then all of a sudden it was Spotify bands now. These bands, I don't know who they are. They're Spotify. Things do change. What happened with the viral videos, you had people, because anytime there was a situation downtown, they used us as a reference. So the shooting at on the 100 block of 17th Street, then there's a picture of us.
A picture of Cine and the Flying Walrus. What the heck did we do?
But to me, I called the news station. I said, hey, that shooting was right in front of a federal building, the most secured building. That's more of a news story. And the guy said, I never looked at it like that. I know, because we were the reference. But people use that. So the problem with us, you get a kid asking girls stupid questions at 2 a.m. and they're doing stupid things, and that's viral. But in back of it is us, So we get associated with that crassness. And there's been guys that I think Franz, he went on to be an attorney. He's like a viral guy, and I hope he does well. But that type of crassness was not something I wanted to be a part of. But he brought that to help himself, But that's not all of what we were about. And it's the same thing that the mayor took, that one viral video. And it's very disheartening because, like I said, if you got to look at the facts as a leader and look at the facts and announce these reactionary, because the people, the public, you're their leader. They're going to lead on what you say is true. And we want to believe you. But it's disheartening as the Heart of McAllen organization now to look back and see no accountability for the things that he said and look forward. So all we can do is look for a candidate to take these positions on and look for somebody that's going to represent all of McAllen and not just put us in a pocket. But I also want him to know, and I want other people to know, that we were promised something that has not come to fruition with my investment. And we want to hold them accountable as a city. So no matter who's in charge, that document and those I hope you get a chance to read them. There's 600 pages. It's very well constructed. And I wish we can get back on track. And if they say they don't want to go back to these plans, well, then why are you picking phase 2? And I think that's the most important question to ask. Because if they're saying they don't want to revisit these plans, why did they bring out phase 2? And they make it sound like this is a new endeavor that they want to end with, their administration, to leave something to leave behind.
To be clear, it's a long podcast. He's talking about phase 2. Phase 2 is the Bowie Reservoir development.
Yeah, the Bowie development, which interestingly will have an entertainment district. But on that note, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And, for folks who want to keep following this story, we'll do our best to kind of track this over time. Be sure to subscribe to the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal podcast. Have a great day, y'all.
Cool.